Good day. Thank you for attending today's webinar. My name is David Millington. I'm your host and Director of Education for Next Level Purchasing Association. And today's webinar is on expert purchasing management. It's webinar one of a four-part series, and I hope that you would utilize the information that's provided for you today in your workplace and to realize your mandate as procurement professionals. Speaking of the mandate for the procurement function, and I always believe that as professionals, we should understand our core mandate and our core purpose. And in this case, the mandate for the procurement function is threefold. One is to manage spend. Two is to support operations. And three is to protect our organizations from risk and from the impact of risk, negative risk elements. And it is very important that as procurement professionals, especially those in particular who are put in a managerial position, maybe purchasing manager, director of purchasing, vice president of procurement, or the chief procurement officer, that we understand the four pillars of management, the four fundamental pillars of management, which are planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. And each one of those dimensions have their particular scope of work and the dynamics that underpin those four elements. So with that said, taking into consideration the four pillars of management, it is very important that as purchasing professionals, in order to effectively manage the procurement function, that we understand the supply chain as a system. And that is made up of suppliers, inputs, processes, outputs, and desired outcomes. So another way to look at the supply chain function or the supply chain system is that as procurement professionals, we are responsible for assuring that we select reliable, responsive, capable suppliers who are aligned with our corporate mandate and our corporate objectives and our departmental objectives, and that those suppliers have the capacity and the capability to bring innovation into the supply chain. If we have a very robust mechanism to scorecard our suppliers, to select and qualify and scorecard and to manage our supplier performance, if they're meeting the requirements, our requirements, then the outcome of that, or the output of those suppliers meeting our requirements, is that they would provide us with the correct inputs, or inputs that are of high quality, meeting the right price points with a high degree of consistency, preferably all of the time. They're capable of delivering and shipping those inputs, those critical inputs, in the right quantities and on time. And we understand our conversion processes. And we understand that if we select suppliers who do not have the capacity, who are not capable to deliver those inputs, high quality inputs at the right price point with a high degree of consistency, that we have to understand that those suppliers would be disruptive to our conversion or our manufacturing processes. And we have to go a step further to understand that this part of this, the supply chain system, the matter of outputs or desired outcomes as they relate to our end users, our organizations, customers, and understanding their requirements, and understand that we are there to create, organizations are there to create value for their customers and for their stakeholders. And us as procurement professionals, we are there to assure that we enable our organizations to create value for our customers by ensuring and assuring that we have the suppliers, again, who will deliver those critical inputs with a high degree of consistency. So it is very important that we understand the dynamics of the supply chain. And this is a very, very simple overview, high-level overview of it. And if you were to, and I encourage you to populate this methodology, which is called SIPOC, to get a chart and list your suppliers, and to look at all of the critical inputs that they provide, and the inputs that exist in the procurement function, in order for the procurement function to function with a high degree of accuracy and sophistication, and to understand the procurement processes, and to understand the processes of all of your internal customers and other functions in your organization, and how the materials that we procure, that you procure as professionals, procurement professionals, how it enables and how it would adversely impact those organizational functions in your organization. So it's very important that we have this, what some experts call a systems thinking approach to our work. So I have listed here some core abilities and attributes of a good procurement manager or a good procurement leader. And I've identified about 9 or so critical aspects or characteristics. One is the ability to lead the procurement function, and to understand the best way to lead the procurement function is to understand it, again, from a systems thinking approach, and to understand it as it relates to our core purpose and our core mandate of supporting our organization's operations, managing spend, and protecting our organizations from risk. And so a good procurement manager has that natural ability to lead, and the person is a systems thinker. Then a good procurement manager is one who is able to ensure that his or her direct reports are aligned with the organizational mandate, that the procurement function, that their procurement function is aligned. It's a very, very collaborative function. The procurement leader is able to collaborate with the suppliers and partner with their suppliers. They're able to partner internally with the other functions, be it the manufacturing function, the logistics function, be it the human resources functions, the research and development functions, or the finance functions, whatever functions you have in your organizations, that you're able to collaborate and align strategically with them. And to ensure, another critical characteristic or attribute of a good world-class procurement leader is that they're able to ensure that their team has the right skills to manage spend and support operations. So the individual is able to ensure that their teams are able to execute the core mandate of the procurement function. So in order to do this, we must clearly understand it, and we must have a robust mechanism or system to measure our current performance as it relates to managing spend, our risk mitigation tactics and strategies, and how well are we performing in terms of supporting our organization's operations, in particular, the conversion processes. And a good procurement leader is able to direct his or her reports and suppliers with a high degree of accountability. And we as procurement leaders must ensure that we have a high degree of managerial excellence. It's part of our management style that we go after managerial excellence. And again, this is in respect to the 4 pillars of management. How well are we at planning our day-to-day strategic and tactical functions? Are we just solely tactically driven, or are we strategically driven? Is there a balance between strategy and tactics? How well are we at organizing our function, and how are we as leaders? And how robust are our mechanisms of control, our control mechanisms to ensure that our processes are stable and are repeatable and performing up to standard. Another critical characteristic of a world-class procurement leader is that he or she has to create a culture of total cost of ownership. And what I mean by this is, I've seen in my many years of procurement practice, I've seen procurement professionals operate on a level of, I would say, silo thinking, where they would get the best price from a supplier, and they would list their savings, and they would assume that their work is done. And what I mean by this is, they do not look at the total cost of ownership. And what I mean by that is, whatever price we pay for critical inputs, if we realize and we book a certain savings, right? Let's say we're able to get the inputs at a very, very robust price point. However, we compromise quality, so the quality of those inputs are not as good. So we have a high defect rate in terms of our inputs. Our inputs have high defect rate. Then they go to our conversion or manufacturing processes. Then the outcome over there is it's defects generated off the line because of defective inputs. Then, to make matters worse, our suppliers ship on a regular basis those inputs. A lot of the deliveries are late. So we have delays on the production line. So if we were to calculate the cost of late deliveries, and if you were to calculate the cost of poor quality inputs, and then we subtract those from the so-called savings that we listed, because we're focusing solely on the price of the input, then we'll have a different picture. So what I just explained to you is a simplified version of the total cost of ownership. So we have this, we're capable of, and it's very important that we create a culture of looking at things in terms of how the materials, the inflows and the outflows of materials that we're responsible for procuring, how they affect the total cost of ownership, how supplier performance and interaction with our suppliers and our value chains, how those interactions affect the total cost of ownership to our organization and to our customer. Going back to what I mentioned initially, we are here as procurement professionals. Our core mandate is to create value for stakeholders, our internal stakeholders, our internal partners, our internal customers, and our end user. And this is underpinned by our core mandate of managing spend, supporting operations, effectively supporting operations, and protecting our organizations from risk. And I always believe that a good procurement leader has the ability to be a astute problem solver and has a degree of mastery of some problem solving methodology of for example, plan, do, check, act, or the Lean Six Sigma problem solving methodology of define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. So I think it's very important that we have a degree of mastery over problem solving, because once we deal with the dynamics and the complexities and the intricacies of a supply chain and a procurement function, we are going to encounter problems on a day-to-day basis. And a world-class procurement leader would collaborate with his or her associates and take those problems head on with, again, a robust problem-solving methodology. So, with that said, we're going to get into the different methods of organizing a procurement function. There are several ways that you could define and organize your work, the workload of your department. There's a centralized methodology. In many companies, they use have a centralized procurement department where only the procurement team and the buyers, they're the only ones who handle purchasing in the business environment and in the particular organization. No one else places any orders. No one else does any negotiation with suppliers. No one else does any type of supplier selection, and they're the only ones who set up supplier performance criteria. So this is one methodology, and each one of these methodologies has pros and cons, has their advantages and their disadvantages. Then there's a decentralized structure in which there's no central procurement department per se, and each function would handle their procurement, meeting their procurement needs in terms of procuring the critical inputs to their process. So if it's an accounting department, they would be responsible for procuring all of the inputs that they need to execute their function, be it software, calculators, ledgers, whatever they need. And if it's a manufacturing department or production department, they'll be responsible for procuring all of their critical inputs that go into their manufacturing process. Then there's a lead divisional buying, where organizations, they have multiple locations, and they have multiple divisions, and the procurement function is executed in a way to efficiently manage buying with the needs and requirements of the business units that are geographically dispersed. Then there's a center-led structure, and then there's a hybrid structure, which is a mixture of the different types of methodologies, and in certain inputs are procured a certain way, maybe in a centralized way, and then other inputs are procured in a decentralized manner. or other inputs are more or less center-led. So it depends on the degree of spend or the degree of risk of not having certain critical inputs that they pose, that each particular type of good that's procured is procured in a different way. So there's a hybrid methodology. And I would like to get into a three-stage plan for for organizing your functional work, the procurement function, for organizing and how that should be structured. And this is very, very, very important that we do this in a very, very balanced and holistic way. So stage one, in terms of how to organize and how to plan the procurement function and how to plan the resources, which are always limited, and how to, in terms of skill sets and other resources, they're always limited, and the focus has to be balanced, else we would not be meeting our mandate effectively. So stage one would be to identify the easy wins, the quick wins. Okay, especially if we reorganizing the procurement function, or if we set up a new department, there are many organizations that would move from one of those methodologies that we covered prior, and is very, very, very important that the workload and the focus is planned effectively in order for us to really manage the spend properly. So we look at areas where they're easy, quick wins. Then stage two would be to identify and to manage and to plan effectively around the bread and butter, right? So this it's very important that this is done effectively and that we have the right resources in this area, and we have to make sure that the procurement team has the skill sets and the necessary procurement acumen to effectively procure in each one of these stages, in particular the bread and butter. So, for example, if a company is, let's say, a bakery, so the bread and butter in the bakery environment would be flour, of course, would be materials like eggs, yeast. So these are and then the packaging components that go with those raw materials. So these are the bread and butter. These are the high ticket items that must be procured effectively. And in order to do so, we have to make sure that the buying group has the necessary skill sets and background and understanding of the market and the particular procurement environments to procure these materials effectively. Because in this particular environment, in terms of a bakery environment, if the flour is not procured effectively, if the flour and the other raw materials and ingredients that go into the end product are not procured effectively, and I mentioned prior that they have to be delivered on time, all the time. These materials have to be of a high quality, and they have to be at the right price point. So you can't have huge spikes in terms of the cost structure in the bread and butter category. And we have to make sure that in that category, the bread and butter category, there's no disruption in the supply chain, right? That the supply of these materials are there, else the whole system would be disrupted and could grind to a halt. And this could have a catastrophic impact on the supply chain and a huge negative fiscal impact on the organization. So to make sure that we really understand the bread and butter category and we plan it effectively, we make sure it's properly resourced. Very important. And then we have the non-traditional categories in which significant savings could come from there, and those could be areas like employee benefits plans and areas that don't go into the conversion process. Or when I say conversion process, I mean in the case of the bakery, the raw materials of flour, butter, eggs are critical inputs that go into the manufacturing process and they're converted into finished goods. So the non-traditional areas would be those. It could be the MRO areas that are not necessarily converted into a finished good. So that's another category. So the idea is that not all categories are equal, and we have to identify the magnitude of spend in each one of these three areas, and we have to understand the magnitude of risk in these three areas. And it is very important that we have a balanced approach and we in these 3 years in terms of how we allocate our resources and our skills assets to effectively realize our mandate of managing spend, supporting our operations, our organization's operation, and protecting our organizations from risk. So that is today's webinar. I hope that you enjoyed it and that the information was very useful for you and practical and helpful to you in your day-to-day activities. If you have not signed up for this course, you could go to Next Level Purchasing Association website, look at Expert Purchasing Management. It's a very, very, very one of my favorite courses, and I provided the link right here for that course. I have a couple minutes for any Q&A. If you have any questions, if you could just send me a note in the chat box, I will gladly respond. So I'll be online for a couple more minutes. And thank you for attending today's webinar. Page 8. Okay. Here you go. Do you see it? So this easy win category, again, if you're setting up a function from scratch, it's good a good way to test new buyers or junior buyers or people who are new to the procurement function. It's a good way to start them off to build confidence. Okay, but it's really an area that is of low risk and has very little impact on the organization as opposed to the bread and butter category. Again, that bread and butter is really underpinned by the organizational mandate and the core purpose of why our organization is there. That is the bread and butter category. So that area could be identified or is the area of the biggest spend and with the area that has the biggest impact on your organizations. So if you have new buyers, junior buyers, inexperienced, you may want to start them off with the stage one, the easy win category, and then move them up to the bread and butter category, if that's possible or practical. I hope that answers your question. And if you need these slides, you could shoot me an email, dmillington, MILLINGTON at nextlevelpurchasing.com, and I'll send you the slides. It's not a problem. Do we have any other questions? Okay, so with that said, again, thank you for attending today's webinar. I hope you enjoyed it and it provided you with some good insight in how to plan and organize and to lead and control your procurement environment as procurement leaders. Again, we have a very, very good course, Expert Purchasing Management, that is delivered by Next Level Purchasing Association, and the link is right here, or you could go online and type in Expert Purchasing Management, a very, very, very good course. Thanks again, and have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.